There's only one daily paper that covers news in Kent, that tells you what's on and where, that can help you find your ideal home or car, that has a county-wide jobs guide and is first class for sport. Your tomorrow is Kent Today.
What's said about Essex is absolute rubbish. Essex isn't a dump, even when it actually is one. This is Cleanaway, which is one of the largest waste management companies in the country. And under my feet are literally thousands and thousands of tons of garbage. We all create rubbish, and getting rid of it is a major environmental challenge. Essex has a bigger problem than other counties because it's so densely populated. The landfill site at Pitsea takes all the rubbish from southeast Essex, 180,000 tonnes a year. I find it hard to believe that this stinking heap and conservation could go hand in hand, but it is possible. Once all the rubbish has been dumped, a fleet of bulldozers levels it out. Then a succession of trucks offload tons of soil on top of the garbage. The company operates 7 landfill sites in the UK, but only at Pitsea do they also dispose of noxious liquid industrial waste. They've invested £4.5 million in a liquid pre-treatment plant. Here, they analyse the liquid waste and convert it into a form which can biodegrade naturally. But here at Cleanaway, they don't just dig a big hole, chuck your rubbish in and then forget all about it. Even toxic industrial waste is treated, then it's mixed up with the domestic refuse, nature's allowed to take its course, and it just rots down like an enormous compost heap. It takes about 5 years for the harmful components in the liquids to break down. Any that haven't are retreated and recycled through the landfill site. Every day, hundreds of lorries thunder past this way. But sometime after 3:30, when the deliveries are finished for the day, there's a rather unusual visitor. A fox. I thought foxes were supposed to be wary and nocturnal. This one's obviously adapted to the routine at the tip. It's amazingly tame. It knows it's tea time. The men who work here are so fond of their resident fox, they even stop to pick up roadkills to feed to it. This time, it's a squashed hare. There are foxes here, mainly because the site is worked in sections. The present dump looks like a barren landscape, but in a few years, it'll resemble the new plantation next to it. The whole area has been carefully designed so that eventually it'll be covered in a variety of different habitats. In just 10 years, these recently planted saplings will have grown into a wood, like this one. There's a flourishing collection of birds and animals on the older parts of the site now. It's a bit like miners' canaries. As long as the birds are singing, then basically the environment's pretty healthy. The reed warbler is just one of those canaries. There's now plenty of woodland and grassland species, and there's waterfowl too. In 1989, a large shallow lake was dug on part of Tilbury's grazing marsh. It succeeded beyond expectations in attracting visiting and breeding birds. The place is riddled with herons. There's 4 on the island, 2 there. One there. 7 herons. Moorhens were some of the first birds to take up residence. Mated pairs battle fiercely with rival couples for space. A pair can't hope to raise a family without a nesting territory, so these fights are deadly serious. Eventually, they sort out their boundaries and settle down to relative peace. And there's not just birds on these banks. Water voles found their way here some years ago. They're the animal called ratty in Wind in the Willows, although they're not a rat or even closely related. They're excellent swimmers. Apart from the water shrew, they're the only small British mammal to have adapted to an aquatic life. Their coat is made up of coarse waterproof outer hairs and a dense soft underlayer. This keeps the animal dry and warm at all times. Their ears have a special membrane to keep out water when they dive. Water voles dig an extensive tunnel system in the banks of rivers and lakes, and it's here that the females give birth. The young are born hairless and helpless, but within a few days have soft brown fur. They're completely dependent on their mother at this age. She has to eat twice her own body weight in food every day to produce enough milk for her family. The babies double their own weight in their first 3 days, have their eyes open at 8 days, and are weaned and ready to leave the nest at just over 2 weeks. Their mother gives them her undivided attention. Whenever she leaves the nest for food, she carefully tucks up her young to make sure they keep warm and snug. All this in what is essentially an industrial wilderness. And there's more. See what's here in the shadow of this pylon? A badger set. Right in the middle of land that was filled up with loads of old rubbish in the 1960s. The badgers don't seem to mind. There's old gloves here and bottles. I suppose it's easier for them to excavate than little bits of earth would be. There's actually a large set here with several entrances. The badgers sleep fitfully underground during the day, only coming out to feed under cover of darkness. The youngster on the left is old enough to be semi-independent, but her mother is still the focal point in her life. Hopefully in a year or two, this youngster will establish her own family in another part of the site, and in 20 years there should be a flourishing badger population. Not every pylon has its own badger set, and I wouldn't expect to find one down the road at Tilbury Power Station. Power generation is often environmentally damaging. Here, they create electricity by burning coal and oil. They're also well aware of the problems involved and are trying to balance industry with wildlife. This great black mountain that I'm standing on is the emergency stockpile for Tilbury Power Station. It's used in times of crisis and at weekends. The coal isn't burnt in really big lumps. It's ground up till it's as fine as face powder, and then it's blasted into the power station over here so that it burns really, really hot. You can get pretty whiffy up here sometimes because of the sewage works over there. But actually, a family of hares were under that big blue thing there, and there are barn owls nesting over there, and adders and newts and a kingfisher and lots of beautiful wild flowers, because in the shadow of this black mountain there's a nature reserve. The reserve is open all year and anyone can visit. There's a nature trail which weaves through various habitats so visitors can explore and see different types of wildlife. In spring and early summer, male reed buntings are easy to spot because they're so noisy. Butterflies flourish in the reserve. These are peacocks. This is a small copper. And this a comma. Sedge warblers are summer visitors that nest among nettles or waterside plants, and seldom more than 4 feet off the ground. Grass snakes will eat eggs and nestlings, but they don't find them very often. These snakes were once common throughout Britain. Now they're only found in damp pockets. Moorhens are doing so well, they're raising up to 3 broods a year. The surviving chicks from the first brood help raise their brothers and sisters from the third clutch. The older chicks are the same size as the adult, but their feathers and beaks are drab brown. Here, the juvenile on the right is helping to feed its newly hatched siblings. No other bird in Britain goes in for this extended family life. In midsummer, grass snakes lay up to 40 eggs somewhere warm and moist. Like the moorhens, this female grass snake has young emerging. She's oblivious to the fact because she deserted them immediately after they were laid. The snakes hatch as perfect miniature replicas of their parents. They're totally independent and know instinctively how to catch food. All this just below the machines of power. Tilbury now works with the Essex Wildlife Trust to make the most of the land within the power station's boundaries. The station staff keep an eye on their wild neighbours and help keep records of sightings. Your name's Tony, isn't it?
That's right.
It's a very nice name. These presumably tell us what's on the security cameras.
Yes, if I go through them for you. Yeah. That is that camera there, which is our reception.
Yeah.
And our mailbox.
Why is the picture bouncing up and down like that?
That is the wind.
On the camera?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you ever see the owl coming out?
Yes, we do, yes. In fact, whilst you was out, we picked it up.
When I was on the coal tip?
Yes.
Is that captured on tape? Or
yes, we film everything that happens.
Can we have a look at it?
Yes, you may.
We can have a look at it. Brilliant. Okay. It's proper nature filming this, isn't it? There are actually 2 pairs of barn owls here, so there must be plenty of mice and voles. The owls nest in special boxes put up for them in the nature reserve. Both pairs are successfully rearing chicks. Industry and wildlife can go together. And if you want to be really green, put your car in the garage and resort to pedal power. Essex isn't all concrete jungle and urban wasteland. There's some stunningly beautiful countryside, and the best way to get round it is by bike. Do you hear that? It's not the bike. The squeaky bike noise is made by Roselle's bush cricket. There's a small colony here at the edge of the marsh. It's the males which sing by rubbing a row of little pegs on one front wing rapidly against the tough edge of the other one. The sound warns off rival males and attracts females at the same time. Each burst of song lasts for up to a minute. Apparently, the louder and longer they sing, the more attractive they are to the females. The females are distinguished by their ovipositor. They use it to lay eggs in plant stems. These crickets like a mild climate and the long grass which grows around estuaries and salt marshes, so Essex is perfect for them. They're quite common in the county, but rare throughout the rest of Britain. They do now seem to be spreading westwards, in many cases along the verges of major roads. Maybe this has something to do with all the salt that's put down in winter. Whatever the reason, there are some strange insects in Essex. A few years ago, A load of people who were interested in moths brought a generator down this little path late one night so they'd have a light to attract the little insects. But there was a power cut, and when the lights went off, they found this. They're glowworms. They're not worms at all, they're little beetles. And they're quite rare now, although there are quite a few of them here, about 9 miles from Southend. It's only the females that glow, make this little green light. It's the little bums that light up to attract the males, and the males come from really quite a long way off to mate with them when they see the green light. There's the beetle, and there's the glow. I was surprised to discover glowworms near sunny Southend, but that's Essex for you. And you won't believe what the people around here do with mud. There's certainly plenty of it. In fact, most of the county's east coast is muddy. Essex is famous for its marshes. They look pretty unproductive, don't they? It's hard to believe that the water that flows over this muddy, oozy stuff has been the basis of a local industry for centuries. An industry that produces a product that's pure and snow white. Salt. Malden sea salt is famous all over the world. How do they actually make it? The water is pumped from the estuary on fortnightly high tides when the salt content is at its maximum. It's then stored in big tanks where it settles before being filtered. Finally, the water's evaporated in these big steel vats. Apparently it takes quite a lot of skill to know when the temperature's just right. It's the sort of thing that's passed on from father to son. You have to check the size of these crystals, and you have to know what the surface tension of the water should look like. And also, you have to listen to the noise that the crystals are actually making. Can you hear them? I think they're singing to do Ron. No, that was the Ronettes, not the crystals. On second thoughts, maybe it was the crystals. Gradually, the salt crystals form on the surface, and as they grow, sink to the bottom. Once the pans have cooled overnight, they're ready for harvesting. The salt is still collected as it was hundreds of years ago by using traditional hoes. So how did they invent this salt-making process in the first place? Well, the story goes that about 2,000 years ago, when the Romans were in Britain, there was this legionnaire bloke called Cassius who couldn't stand the lousy English weather because it made his bones ache so much. And his servants used to make him these baths full of hot seawater so he could lie in it and ease his aches, which was fine, until one day they put boiling water in by mistake, and old Cassius went absolutely spare until the water cooled down and he noticed all these white crystals around the edge of it. And he tasted them and he found they tasted pretty good, so he started serving them up to his fellow officers, and from then on the industry was born. Although why his fellow officers should have been prepared to lick his dirty bath ring, no one satisfactorily explained. But then they've always done weird things in Essex.